Now we'll start with the legislative history research process. How to find the documents covered in the previous video. There are a number of tools, and the ones we're going to look at focus on locating compiled legislative histories. Here is a 4-step process that you can follow that will provide you with consistent results. The first step is to locate the necessary legislative information. We've talked about them before, but these are the popular name, the session law, and the bill number. The second step is going to be checking for compiled legislative history or other finding aids. The third step is identifying committees and locating committee reports, and those are the most important pieces of legislative history. They will always be included in compiled legislative histories, but if there's no compiled legislative history, this is the document you're going to look for first. Finally, the last step is to determine if any additional documents exist and whether or not they are useful. That process will vary based on the location or the period of time the bill was passed. I always recommend starting with a legal research guide. For example, we have the Lewis and Clark Federal Legislative History Research Guide. It's pretty straightforward, covers all of the document types and relevant databases. We also have an Oregon Legislative History Research Guide. Also, I want to point out the Law Librarians Society of the District of Columbia's Legislative Sourcebook. When doing federal, statutory, or regulatory research, their website is a great place to start. The key to locating legislative history is having the essential legislative information. You will often start with the popular name, but if not, you would discover this by looking at the code or the session law. The other place to find a popular name is, of course, news articles, other types of professional publications, anywhere there's reporting on the legislative process. The session law, you will remember, is the most authoritative text of a statute. You'll want to locate the public law number and statutes at large citation. This information can be found at the bottom of a U.S. Code section or through the popular name table. Last but not least, you will need the bill number. The legislative history documents will mostly be identified with the bill number. You will need the bill number, the House designation, and the session number or year, since the bill numbers are reused. The key to efficient legislative history research is discovering whether a compiled legislative history exists. They are created in several formats. The first are the print versions of legislative histories, which collect all of these documents in one physical publication. Sometimes the government collects the documents, and other times it's a law firm or academics. They're generally for major pieces of legislation. These compiled legislative histories are not only available in print. A number of them have been scanned and uploaded to Hein Online. Whether in print or online, the nice thing about these versions is they have a table of contents and will often have an index. And occasionally they'll also have introductory notes that help explain the legislative process and flag the most important documents. On Hein Online, you will be able to use the platform's search function to locate documents in the compiled legislative histories. Another pair of powerful compiled legislative history platforms are ProQuest Congressional and ProQuest Legislative Insight. ProQuest Congressional is a comprehensive collection of legislative history records that have been digitized. It is valuable because it has materials related to both bills that did and did not pass into law. ProQuest Legislative Insight is from the same company, but on the Legislative Insight platform, they have gone back into history and tied all of the associated documents together for thousands of enacted laws. What makes ProQuest Legislative Insight really powerful is that it links not just documents tied to the version of the bill that was passed into law, it also has previous sessions and previous versions of the bill all linked together, with testimony, hearings, committee reports, all in one place. They're very expensive platforms, but very useful. Westlaw and Lexis have some legislative history documents. They have both dedicated databases to congressional records, and they also have some of the documents tied to specific session laws. In certain treatises, they will have the legislative histories for major pieces of legislation in the covered practice areas. Another really useful tool for legislative history research are cases. Cases will often discuss the legislative history, especially if a statute is ambiguous or the purpose seems to be frustrated. There are obviously other legislative history tools you can use. For more recent statutes, GovInfo and Congress.gov are very useful and freely available everywhere. And with that, we've covered the best sources for compiled legislative histories.